Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Borodin's Prince Igor, which was live streamed from the Metropolitan Opera House in New York and screened at the Sinistar Cubics movie theaters in Alexanderplatz. The conductor was Gianandrea Noseda, who is very well known in a lot of opera houses and concert halls throughout Europe and America. The production was by Dmitry Chernyakov. The costumes were by Elena Zaitseva. The lights were handled by Gleb Filshtinsky. The choreography was by Itzik Galili. And the cameraman was Gary Halverson. This was made possible by the Neubauer Family Foundation, Bloomberg, and Tall Brothers. Now, my experience with Prince Igor is extremely basic because the only music that I know is the Polisveden dances. And believe it or not, this was based, well, the music from Prince Igor was also added into a very well-known musical called Kismet. And I bet you all know this famous line from the Polisveden dances, the one that goes da-da, 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 da-da-da. That's the one. I'm sure that you've heard it in a lot of movies, cartoons, and many other forms of entertainment. And this line as well, the one that goes da 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 da. Yes, I'm sure all of you musical fans will know this as the opening lyrics of Strangers in Paradise. And this was actually based from one of the Polisveden dances of this opera, which is actually the most famous piece of music from Prince Igor. And what I also noticed is the challenge that singers have when singing the main roles, of Prince Igor, Vladimir, Konchakovna, Yaroslavna, Prince Galitsky, and the Khan Konchak. But I would have to say that the most challenging roles for any male voice would pretty much have to be Vladimir. And that's not to say that Prince Igor isn't that challenging. It is completely challenging. And also that of Prince Galitsky. There's a lot of challenging lines for any male voice. For a high male voice, it would have to be Vladimir because he has all of those high notes. And then with Prince Igor, he does have some high notes, but his voice definitely sits a lot comfortably. His vocal range sits very comfortably, which makes a lot of baritones and basses sing him. And Prince Galitsky, at times, his vocal range does go above the usual range of a bass. But still, it is quite a challenge. And Konchakovna's vocal range sits very comfortably and also quite low for a mezzo-soprano. In fact, contraltos flock to sing this role, especially that of Yaroslavna. I mean, she sings a high C in the beginning of the opera. That's how challenging this opera is, well, Russian opera in specific terms is, in terms of the vocality of the main characters. And basically, its only well-known piece of music, well, the one that I've heard a lot of times, is the Polisveden dances. Now, going into the review itself. The production was very vivid and very colorful. I especially liked how it all began in this army station in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it was actually pretty historically accurate. I definitely felt like I was in the set. I didn't feel like I was just, well, in the set. I definitely felt like I was there in the actual place. It was so real. It was so vivid, so animated in a figurative way that I was so amazed. It was just astonishing to see how much work the people behind this production make to make something so astounding. Probably that's why I really love the Metropolitan Opera House, because out of every production I've seen, I definitely feel that this is one of those opera houses that have the best productions. The next one goes to the Royal Opera House, of course. And even behind the scenes, I could really see all the stagehands, everyone in charge of moving the props and creative stuff here and there, and I could see them work really well and really in harmony to make this production extremely possible. And another feat of this production that is just extremely beautiful were basically the poppy field scenes. Now, those scenes were definitely surreal and extremely gorgeous. And it basically whisks me into another world. And according to an interview during an intermission, this was basically supposed to state that it's Prince Igor's mind. I mean, it's supposed to be his vision of a utopia where there's no war, where there's peace, where there's unity. And we see the poppy field, which is Polosfera. And it's extremely gorgeous. I definitely felt that this was the highlight of the opera. The poppy field scene was just extremely gorgeous. And not to mention, since this was a live stream, I felt that the camera work was extremely well done. I felt that every shot was well detailed and very crisp and clean. So basically, this production was very vivid, beautiful, and it was certainly a feast for the eyes. And now let's go to the singers. Now, this is a fine cast of singers. And in the title role, we have Ildar Abdrazakov, a name that I've encountered so many times, and I've actually heard a few clips of him on YouTube. I definitely really love his performance of Prince Igor. He was able to convey that dignity, that virility, and that raw manliness that very few other baritones and bass baritones can do. And he was really that dignified. He was able to portray the Tsar in such a very powerful and dignified manner. And his voice was in fantastic shape. He had such a velvety, round, and rich basso voice that was even throughout the registers. And it was extremely well tuned. And his timbre, very, very beautiful. It was an extremely seductive timbre that caught me on the edge of my seat. In fact, every scene that he was in was so involving. And even in the end of the opera, you do get the feeling that he does feel uncomfortable because, well, his town is in ruins. How else is he supposed to feel about it? And then he goes quite insane. He rings the bell, which is a huge pole, and then they rebuild the city. I definitely felt that he was an amazing actor and an equally amazing singer. Singing the role of his faithful wife, Yaroslavna, was Oksana Dika. I definitely love her voice as well. To quote one of Rona's reviews, she stated that she had this mezzo color to her voice. And I definitely agree with Rona. She definitely had this beautiful mezzo timbre, and it was an extremely powerful and homogeneous instrument. She was able to sing all those high notes powerfully. I mean, that high C in the beginning of the opera was extremely exciting. It made my hair stand on end, and all her high A's, B flats, and B's were extremely well placed. And her acting, she is completely captivating, not to mention she's extremely beautiful and very pretty. And she really does look suitable to be anybody's wife. And she was able to convey all of those emotions that Yaroslavna has. The anguish that she feels because her beloved husband has gone to war. The fear that she has of whether he's gonna die or will he live, and the anticipation that she has, and the pity that she gives to her husband when she sees that he does feel that there's no hope to rebuild this country that was invaded. I could really see a lot of wonderful things with Miss Dika as Yaroslavna. Her voice was in tip-top shape and her acting was extremely involving. And their son was sung by Sergei Semishkor. I definitely loved his voice as well. I know I kind of repeat this whole I love their voices thing, but I can't really help it. It is just that gorgeous. It was extremely homogeneous throughout the registers. Every high note that was sang or that was sung was extremely well placed. It was ringing. It was so wow, just wow. What a voice he had. Every note that he sang was so convincing, so emotional, so passionate that it was just extremely just astonishing. I was completely enthralled by his voice because it was a lyric tenor voice that was extremely capable of spinto tenor roles and spinto tenor lines. And here he was able to handle all of those difficult passages extremely masterfully. Not to mention his acting was very convincing. We're so convinced that he is this young, ambitious prince who is quite torn between the love of his father and the love of Konchakovna. And in the end, he chose Konchakovna because, well, he's man enough. He can have the girl, and they can live happily ever after. And he's man enough to make his own decisions. Sure, he can fight for his country, but it's Konchakovna that he loves with all of his heart, with all of his soul and his body. You could really see the passion that he has for a beautiful woman like Konchakovna. And he really did a fantastic job. And I really hope to see more of Mr. Semishkor. Because, frankly, he has such a beautiful instrument that is so capable of dramatic lines, and his acting was very convincing. And speaking of Konchakovna, we have mezzo-soprano Anita Rakhvelishvili. I definitely love the timbre of her voice. It was a sexy, seductive, dark, and very, very virile mezzo-soprano voice that was extremely capable of singing contralto. And who wouldn't fall in love with such a sexy voice like Madame Rakhvelishvili's? Yeah, I know, I basically have a hard time pronouncing that name, but still. Her voice was extremely lush and, like I said, very sexy and very seductive as well. I mean, it's no wonder why she is extremely praised for her interpretations of Carmen and Amneris, and hearing her as Konchakovna was a thrill because of her husky and very seductive voice, and her stage presence was extremely captivating. She was able to make Konchakovna not just a very sexy woman with all the goods, but a very strong and independent woman who knows for a fact that Vladimir will always stay by her side, for better or for worse. She is so loyal and loving towards Vladimir. Heck, even before the end of the opera, she states that she'll be a slave for him. That's just how Miss Rakhvelishvili was able to capture all of those nuances that Konchakovna has. She's not only capable of capturing the sexy and seductive nature of the Konchakovna, but also her loyalty, her passion, and her desire to have Vladimir, because she knows for a fact that she'll always love him and he'll always love her. And then we have Yaroslavna's brother, Prince Galitsky, sung by Mikhail Petrenko, a basso that I've heard in YouTube and in some clips, and I thought his voice was pretty good. Sure, it could have been a heftier voice, but still, he was able to sing all of his notes really well. There were no vocal pitfalls, no wobbles. It was extremely well sung. He really sang the part really well, but sometimes I kind of wish for a heftier sounding voice. But still, it can be forgiven because his voice was extremely beautiful, and he can make it powerful when he has to. Especially in those party moments. I mean, oh my god, did he just go all out. He's able to make Prince Galitsky, well, at first, a good friend to Prince Igor. But then in the later acts, we see him becoming such a treacherous asshole, wanting to take advantage of his own sister, and using Prince Igor's palace as, well, for partying. And I definitely felt that he was able to convey all that hamminess and that grandeur and just how lustful he is as a person. And it was just so astonishing, and it was completely enthralling to see Mr. Petrenko do his thing as Galitsky. I mean, just wow. The party scene was definitely the hugest highlight of them all. Even though his singing could use a little bit of tweaking, I think it will take some time. Maybe give him 5 or 3 years from now, it'll become heftier and a lot more weightier. But still, for now, he has a beautiful timbre, and his stage presence was really that addicting to watch. And then we have Stefan Kotzan singing the role of the Khan Konchak. I definitely feel that his voice has a beautiful timbre, and it had such nice low notes. Though, like I said, it could be heftier, it could be bigger, it could be a lot weightier, but still, he has a beautiful timbre that's extremely capable of hitting all of the low notes, especially that extremely low B flat that I heard in his little aria. It's completely thrilling, though I'll have to say, give it a few more years and it'll be a lot more weightier, a lot more deeper. It'll be a lot more capable of hitting all of those deep, full notes. Just wait for a few years and it'll become fuller and a lot more capable of hitting all of those low notes. But still, he still has a beautiful voice. He still has that Slavic touch to his voice that he was able to use to his advantage. And it's a very beautiful and well handled instrument. And his stage presence was equally as hammy and equally just fantastic. He was able to make the Concha quite a ham. I mean, his various punching moments with Prince Igor, and just wow, it was just hilarious at times. And at times he does have this menacing look, but it's absolutely fun just watching Stefan Kotzan do his thing as the Khan Konchak. It was really fun watching him just act like a huge ham and still give such beautiful, dignified, and quite seductive singing. It was just wonderful watching Mr. Kotzan as the Khan Konchak. And then we have Skula and Yeroshka, who were sung by Vladimir Ognovenko and Andrei Popov. Now with Ognovenko as Skula, I definitely felt that his voice was quite heavy for such a small role. But that's not to discredit him. No, I think his voice was extremely powerful and very manly and extremely capable of singing every basso profondo part. But Skula is one of those parts that I would rather have a character bass sing it, or a bass baritone or a basso buffo sing it. But with Ognovenko, he's a basso profondo. Now I have no problem, but it's a bit too heavy, but still, he has a very wonderful instrument, and he's a very great musician. He's able to handle his voice very well, hence there are no wobbles and no issues with his voice after several years of singing. I mean, he's a veteran. And like I said, his voice may be kind of hefty, or even too hefty for such a small and character part of Skula, but still, his voice was extremely well handled and his stage presence was quite funny. He was definitely funny in this part. He didn't try to overdo it, he didn't try to make the comedy in such bad taste, but he was able to pull off the comedy very well. I mean, these are basically two screw-ups who screw everything up, who basically screw everything up for themselves and for the prince, that they serve very well. And I definitely felt that with Ognovenko as Skula, he was really funny and definitely a lot of fun to watch, though at times I kind of wish that he could have been casted as the Khan Konchak, because I definitely felt that that part would have been for him. But still, he was a lot of fun in singing such a character role, and he was able to give such nice acting chops as well. Now, going to Yeroshka, sung by Andrei Popov, I definitely felt that his voice was really good. He was able to use his character tenor voice in such a fun way. And his voice was very even throughout the registers, and he was able to play Yerushka as, well, a comic foil, but still a lot of fun to watch. And like I said, his voice extremely good, and I pretty much hope to hear more of him in the near future. I also like to hear more of Ognovenko in the near future and maybe see some clips of him on YouTube. And like Ognovenko stated in an interview, he said that he sang the roles of Khan Konchak and Prince Galitsky for so many years, but this is basically his first time as Skula. Basically, in my opinion, I would have really wanted him as the Khan Konchak. Then we have Ovlur, sung by Mikhail Vekua. He had a really good voice, and he was able to portray such a concerned advisor really well. And even though he didn't really have a lot to sing, he makes up for it for his great acting and equally good singing. And then we have Barbara Dever as the nurse. I basically heard Barbara Dever in a few clips of Dialogue of the Carmelites on YouTube. The only scene that I've basically watched Miss Dever do her thing was with Anya Cilia as Madame de Coissy. That's pretty much the only thing that I've watched with Barbara Dever, but seeing her in such a character role like the nurse was a real treat. She was able to use her dramatic mezzo or dramatic mezzo contralto voice into such a great advantage. It was an extremely beautiful and well-handled instrument, and it had such lovely low notes. And even though she didn't have a lot to sing, it was a well-handled instrument, and it had beautiful low notes that were quite cavernous and quite sexy as well. And she was able to portray the motherly nature of the nurse, and also quite concerned as well of how Yaroslavna is faring. So basically, she was able to portray the nurse's loving and tender nature to Yaroslavna very well to a T. And then in the role of the Polisvita maiden, we have Kiri Deonarin. She was basically an offstage voice, but I'll say this. Her voice was very beautiful, and it had such a seductive timbre to it, and was quite capable of hitting such high notes. And that's pretty much it with Miss Deonarin as the maiden. So overall, there was a lot of first-rate singing from select performers, but overall, the singing is very fine. It was pretty much at its finest, and the choreography was definitely astonishing and very enthralling. I mean, you have the Polisvitan dances being danced by such extremely trim and extremely attractive dancers, well, both male and female, and they danced very beautifully, and they also looked very handsome and beautiful as well. They were able to just do their thing with such finesse and power. So overall, this was definitely worthwhile watching, with a great cast, with a great conductor, a very colorful and vivid production, and very well choreographed dances. This is definitely worth watching, and I guess for all of those people who are still in New York, if you haven't watched this opera yet, go ahead and watch it. I don't know how long it's still running, but like I said, just go ahead and watch it. This is just extremely wonderful, with such top-tier singing, especially from Mr. Abdrazakov and Mr. Semishkor, Miss Dika, and Miss Rakhvelishvili. They were all top-tier singers, and I personally hope to hear more of them. Like I said, absolutely amazing. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune into my next opera review, and this time it's another Russian opera. It's Prokofiev's Fiery Angel, which will be shown at the Komische Oper Berlin, and surprise, surprise, it's performed in Russian. Well, as what Russian operas should be performed in. And until next time, this is Antoni signing off and wishing you all a good night.